What's good, everybody? Take Easy back here with another wrestling review. Today we're going to do a bit of a hodgepodge of stuff. I'm going to give you the July top 10. I'm going to review Dragon Gate's Dangerous Gate, because I haven't actually put that on video yet. And better late than never, I wanted to talk about the movie Weapons. So let's jump right into it. So I only got one honorable mention for July. July's a bit of a light month for me. I just couldn't get into the G1 at all. I tried a couple times, and I really only got through the semi and the finals. The semifinals, I guess both the semis and the finals are both in August, but the tournament started in July. I'm sure there's good stuff on there. Looking at cage matches, a good amount of stuff ranked there that I should have watched, and I've attempted to watch some of it. I can't get into New Japan right now, so I don't have any New Japan on here. Hopefully something turns around there, but I just can't even, without even being emotionally invested and just wanting to watch the matches, I just can't even do that right now. I only got one honorable mention. I think I said that already, and that was Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega from AEW All In. I gave this 3 3/4 stars. I thought this was pretty good. When you knew the expectations going into it, it was always going to be the worst match of the 5, just because of where those guys are at their careers right now. If you pay attention to like AEW books, I thought it was pretty obvious Okada would win. And with the introduction of Callis, that it was going to be kind of underhanded. So a lot of those elements didn't take away from this for me, just because I was expecting all of it. It still was not quite great. Some people probably thought it was great. I thought it was right on the cusp of being great. I just don't know that Kenny has the explosion anymore, so trying to do an epic without that element, I thought hurt it and made it pretty slow in the beginning, which ultimately held it back from being a 4-star match for me. Coming in at number 10, I've got FTR taking on the Outrunners from AEW Collision on July 2nd. I thought this was one of the best matches FTR has ever had in their career. Complete carry job. I don't think Outrunners did a goddamn thing in this match, and it's a 4-star match. So all credit to Dax and Cash. I thought on this night, you can't do it every night, which I think they've shown, because they've gone back to the well and wrestled Outrunners a couple times since then. But on this given night, they could have worked a 4-star match with 2 broomsticks, and in a lot of ways, that's what they did. So props to them. I don't think it's a recommended match in terms of a great, outstanding, like you gotta see this match. But I think if you're like a wrestling nerd, it's a must watch just because it's one of the best carry jobs I've ever seen. Coming in at number 9, I had Dustin Rhodes versus Kyle Fletcher from AEW Collision for the TNT belt. I thought this was pretty good. This was a carry job is not fair to Dustin Rhodes, but I thought this match did have a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I think you, as a seasoned wrestling fan, you can kind of see that. I don't think that's necessarily a detriment to it, but I have another no DQ match higher up the list on here, which I just don't think had those elements, and I don't think those elements are necessarily even take away from the match. It's just, for me, it's like I can see the rails. I thought the screwdriver to the knee wrap was really silly. I didn't think that was effective or heinous at all. But a lot of good spots. You know, everything you kind of want out of a no DQ match or whatever the stipulation on this match was. And I think a real feather in Kyle Fletcher's cap, just because I think a lot of his greatness has come working against other great guys like Ospreay. So being able to do this against someone like Dustin, who's not a bad worker by any means, but he's pushing 60 years old. He has on 2 knees that needed surgery, and able to get a 4-star match out of him, I think was a great accomplishment for Kyle. Coming in at number 4, I had the team of Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay taking on the Young Bucks from AEW All In on July 12th. This was my favorite match on All In. I thought this was the most kind of PWG Dragon Gate-esque tag, which is my preferred style. As I've gotten more into Dragon Gate this year, I've kind of got back to my roots of that's what I really love in wrestling. And I think that delivered in those aspects. There were elements of this match I didn't like. I didn't like that Will Ospreay kicked out of 27 EVP triggers. I think kicking out of finishers in general can be effective, but there's a very thin line of where it goes from being really effective to just being overplayed and takes away from the match. And I thought this match really jumped the shark in that regard. But some great spots. I think they did a double tornillo, I think was the move, or about a month removed from me watching it at this point, that I thought was incredible. They did some great sequences where they had that hidden blade and house call at the same time. That setup was great. And I think it's 4 of the best guys in the world, and you can't really go wrong. 4 stars on that. Coming in at number 7, I had Madoka Kikuta versus Strong Machine J from Dragongate Kobe World. This was the no DQ match I was alluding to. 4 stars, the same as Dustin and Kyle Fletcher. But I thought this one was just a little bit more effective. It was faster pace, which I think helped. And it was 2 young guys just going a mile a minute, going through a lot of the spots you don't normally see from Dragongate with tables and weapons and pile of chairs and all that stuff. You don't get the bloody brawl like you did in the AEW version because Dragongate doesn't do blood. But I think knowing the elements of Dragongate, they pushed the line on a lot of that, which I thought was really effective here. Coming in at number 6, I have Jon Moxley taking on Adam Hangman Page from AEW Dynamite on July 30th. I liked this match a lot more than the All-In match. I thought the All-In match was just very slow and plotting and epic for the sake of being epic, which I know worked for the AEW fan base, and I don't think it was necessarily wrong to do that. I just personally found it pretty boring. I even fell asleep watching it on my first watch through, just because you know all the elements, you know all the House of Torture, Bloodline bullshit is coming, but they worked the match like it wasn't going to come, and it being a last man standing match, you would do spots, and you hadn't seen Claudio or Yuta yet, and you do the 8 count, and it was just a lot of man, this is a lot of just standing around. But this match didn't have any of that. This match was a TV match. They worked this at the pace I was hoping they would work all in at. High intensity, high pace. You still got all the run-ins and bullshit that you have to do with the Death Riders. But it was a very minor element of this match, I felt like, instead of the defining story. And as someone that quit the Death Rider story and didn't give a shit about it by the end, that was much preferred for me. So I gave this 4 stars as well. Coming in at number 5, I have Ryoya Tanaka taking on UT from Dragongate Kobe World on July 13th. This was the coming out party for Tanaka that we all kind of saw coming. If you were watching Dragongate, he really had started to put it together, both with his body and his work and his presence. I think it's kind of shocking. I've always liked Tanaka since getting back into Dragongate, but he went from a Brave Gate guy to oh shit, this guy's going to win the Dream Gate, I feel overnight. And UT was on a great run. This was the end of his title run. And I thought both guys were in their element here. Everything was working pretty good. Tanaka really botched the finish at the end, which hurts this match a lot, I think, because it was flowing and then he missed the guy completely jumping off the rope and counted the pin anyway, because what else are you really going to do in that situation? So that limited this to 4 stars, but I thought it was great work. Tanaka's work since then has been even better. And I really don't know what to think of him as the Brave Gate champion, but I'm covering Dangerous Gate after this, so we'll get into it a little bit more there. Coming in at number 4, we have KENTA versus KENOH from Noah on July 20th. I thought this match was great. I haven't gone back to actually watch the KENOH Ozawa match from the night before. That was also supposed to be great, but I've always liked KENTA, even with him at this depleted stage of his career. I still enjoy aspects of him and him being able to turn back the clock here. And by all accounts, it sounds like he's doing that in Noah in general, but he really did it in this match, and it was just 2 dudes beating the shit out of each other, which I thought was really good. I had quite a few 4-star matches on my list this month. This one was also 4-star, but this one is far and away, I think, better than the other 4 stars we just went through. Yeah, it was just, they just beat the shit out of each other the whole time, and it was awesome. Coming in at number 3, I have Shun Skywalker versus YAMATO for the Open the Dream Gate title from Dragongate Kobe World, July 13th. This was the end to Yamato's reign. I talked about this on the Blue Moon podcast as well as on this channel, previewing Kobe World. I might have even done a Kobe World review now that I think about it, and I'm just blanking on it recording this. Really good match. I think it was missing that element to really make it an epic for me. It was slow in parts. I stayed up to watch this match live, and I had to get off the couch and stand up because I was drifting in the middle there because it just started to really slow down. But the beginning and especially the ending sequence I thought was really great. And then you had the ending angle, which I'm not including in the actual rating of this match, that I thought was great. So if you're a Dragon Gate fan or you're looking to jump into Dragon Gate, I think this was a must watch, because it's the ending of that main Paradox chapter and the beginning of this Shun Kikuta chapter. That was 4.25. I don't know if I said that. Coming in at number 2, you had Bandido versus Kikuta Takeshita for the ROH World title from the ROH show the night before All In, from the ROH Supercard of Honor show on July 11th. I thought this was the best stateside match in July. These guys went out there and kicked ass like you knew they would. I was a little worried about them holding back because Takeshita was in the G1 and all the elements going into All In the night after, with them both probably being in the Casino Battle Royal and ultimately being in that. But they didn't hold back at all. And in hindsight, watching how the Casino Gauntlet was worked, there was no reason to hold back, so I'm glad they didn't. They went out there and had a pretty epic match overall. I would say it never lulled despite being like nearly 30 minutes. You didn't get any of like the Don Callis family bullshit for the most part. I think you had a little bit of heel shenanigans in there, but for the most part, it was just two of the best in the world doing what they do best. And I thought that was great. And if you're a fan of either of these guys, this is a must-see match. I went 4.25. And my number one match in July was the Open the Triangle Gate 3-way match from Kobe World dragongate, July 13th. That was Love&Peace taking on the champions of Brats, taking on Team Mexico. This was everything I love about pro wrestling. These guys turned back the clock with that old Dragon Gate styles, especially like a Yoshino style of just working lightning pace. With 9 guys in there, you really don't have to take a break at all, and that's what they did, which I thought was incredible. Jackie Kamei and Bandido and all of Team Mexico really read along with them. They've got great chemistry. Team Mexico is great basis for those two guys, so they can pull out some absolutely insane moves. I thought the best part of this match, though, is the encounters between Ishin and Mochizuki Jr. I'm not nearly as high on Mochi Jr. as everyone else seems to be, but when he was in there with Ishin, it was just magic. I thought that was incredible. They were beating the shit out of each other. Their big impact moves had a lot of impact. Their chemistry was off the charts. There was a lot of great chemistry in this match. It was an elimination match, so Love&Peace were the first eliminated team, which is what took away from this being a 5-star match, I think. That first half to 2/3 with Love&Peace, I think, is a 5-star match. I think everything was perfect about that. You even had a Bendito botch, but it didn't really matter. It was funny, but it didn't slow the match down at all, so it was kind of that perfect element where you got a like guttural laugh after watching him stumble and fall all the way across the ring. But it was in a spot where they were running from corner to corner to set up a move, so you missed one move, but they just got up and did something different. So it didn't take away from that at all. You had 2 more Bandido matches in that final third where they're taking on the Young Brats, including an outside dive where he just fell off the ropes, and you couldn't really do anything but redo the spot. So that one hurt the match the most, I think. I don't think it really hurt the flow all that much. Everything slowed down once you get the 3 Love&Peace guys out of there, which I think hurt the match a little more. Not that this is bad. I still ultimately gave this match 4 3/4. This is my number 4 match on all of 2025. I think everyone needs to drop what they're doing and watch this match. It's just that last third is just not quite at that level because they were just firing at all cylinders at the beginning of this match. And you couldn't really reverse the order because Team Mexico ultimately won, and Z-Brats were the team that pinned Love&Peace, so you kind of have to change everything to get Love&Peace there at the end. So I wouldn't change anything about this. It's just not quite a 5-star. It's 4 3/4, but it's amazing. It's everything I want out of Dragon Gate, everything I want out of pro wrestling. All right, so that is the July top 10. Let's jump over to reviewing Dangerous Gate altogether. If you're in any of the Discords I'm in, Blue Moon or the Social Suplex, I think I only gave my ratings in Blue Moon. I talked about this a little bit on Doc's podcast yesterday, but there was like 8 of us there, so I didn't get the star ratings for everything. So let's just quickly go over star ratings of the matches. Doc Lariat's podcast, the PW prescription. You have a bunch of us talking about Dragon Gate, this Danger Gate show, and Dragon Gate as a whole. I thought it was a lot of fun. So you can check that out as well. I'll probably put the link in the description if you guys want to check that out. So our opening contest was Homare taking on ISHIN. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I thought this was one of the better Dragon Gate openers on the year. Dragon Gate, like a lot of Japanese promotions, they kind of start slow and build as the car escalates. But with Dragon Gate putting the opener on free on YouTube, I feel like they alter that a little bit. So the opener is typically better than like match 2, match 3, but they don't necessarily always give it time. They gave these guys time. I think they went about 12 minutes, which was almost what I was hoping for. I was hoping like 15, so 12 was fine. Homare is still not quite at his 1-year anniversary as a pro wrestler, which is crazy when you watch this match because there's some things that he does that are just so good for a guy his age. For a 20-year-old that's 11 months into his career, it's remarkable some of the things he can do. The thing I really took note of, which is funny because it's something I don't really even pay attention to in wrestling, but there was a moment where he got mounted punches on Ishin, and they look just fucking great. Like, they look better than 99% of wrestlers, which is, it kind of left me at a loss for words because I was like, why is he so good at this? There's guys that have wrestled for 15 years that their mounted punches look like shit, and his look incredible. They look like he's really laying them in. And maybe he was just laying them in. Maybe that was the secret, but just great stuff. Following Homare is one of my favorite things in Dragon Gate. He's not one of my favorite Dragon Gate wrestlers, but just being able to see a kid this special from the ground floor. I didn't see the first couple matches. He debuted, I think, August or September of 24, and I really started watching everything in January and was just watching kind of here and there from July to January of 2024. So I haven't seen every second of Homare, but I feel like I'm still in on the ground floor with Homare. And just knowing that this guy's not only 20, but not even a year into his career, and he's this good, and he's, and they know it. Everyone in Dragon Gate knows it, which is also cool because it's just a matter of when, not if, that he's going to win the Dragon Gate championship. It's not anytime soon because there's a lot of killers in Dragon Gate, but being into the ground floor with him is great. Ishin is also terrific. I don't really ever know what to say with Ishin because he's such a unique character that I don't know what to comp him to. People with more like wrestling history, wrestling historians, can comp him to other guys a little better. He's not necessarily like the world's greatest worker, but I think that's a lot of the shtick, not necessarily actually his wrestling. So that's what I struggle with him. But I love him. It's not detrimental to him at all. I don't know how to put into words what Ishin is. But this is very fun. This is free on YouTube. I would recommend this. I gave this 3.5. So it's not a great match by any means, but it's two young guys. I think Ishin's also under 25, so 2 U25 guys going out there putting on a really solid match. Match 2 was an 8-man tag. Love&Peace taking on the Mochizuki Dojo. Mochizuki was in the Brave Gate match later on, so he called in his best friend Don Fuji to take his place here in this match. This is just Love&Peace. They're great. I don't think Love&Peace can really have a bad match. This was a 3-star match because it didn't have a lot of time, and the focus was getting Ryoya UT over, which there's nothing, I don't think Ryoya UT is bad at all. It's just there's so many young killers in Dragon Gate. They just debuted Kimura a couple matches from now. That was his 4th match in his wrestling career that already seems better than Fuda. So I think that's really what the hindrance to Fuda is that he's just in a land of killers and he's just a guy. But they're putting him over. He's getting a Brave Gate shot in his hometown, so I think that was the main driving focus of this match, which is a bit of a bummer because all 4 guys in Love&Peace that I'm a big fan of. Some people are a little wishy-washy on Hyo. I love Hyo. I love Jackie Rita. Jackie Rita is my tag team of the year in 2025. And Mochi Jr., everyone loves more than I do, but I still think he's great. And then you have Sahara and Daiki on the other side as his dojo mates, which I like both of them a lot more than Fuda. But Fuda got a couple wins leading up to this show. He got the pin in this show. So they're building him up for that Brave Gate match. We'll see if the push continues after the Brave Gate match. I'm dubious of that, but that's what we're doing there.
All right, next up, we have the Battle Royal, where the winner gets a year's supply of Vinegar. This Vinegar brand is the new Dragon Gate sponsor. I should have learned the name of it, but I didn't. This was mostly get everyone on the card match. So you had all the big names that don't have any matches here the rest of the way, which was more star-studded than normal. So we had a Dragon Gate versus All Japan match later in the card, and then the Triangle Gate match is a Dragon Gate versus Noah match. So you had a lot of guys booked on this card. So you had most of Paradox in there, Doi, Suzumu, BB Hulk, Kagetora. You had, I think, all of Natural Vibes in there, other than Flamita, obviously. Benkei was in there. The couple Z-Brats guys, Kato and Kai were in there. This was your Ultimo match. Sure, I'm missing some guys on there too. I thought this was fun. This was a fun match. It had a lot of comedy elements with Punch Tamanaga and Takashi in there. But I don't have a lot of familiarity with Punch. So I enjoy his spots because I've only been seeing him for this year as opposed to for like the last decade. So it doesn't wear thin on me yet. The new Takashi character I've gotten used to, and I don't mind it. It probably helps that when I first got back in and was watching him, he was doing the drag, which was awful, fucking terrible. So this is such an improvement that Cyberkong doesn't bother me nearly as much anymore. Not a lot of great spots in this match. Trying to think of great spots, I realized I forgot to mention that Sahara's shoulder tackle in the previous match was great. That was the best spot in that match. Nothing quite like that here. Hashi does his little like jumping celebration, like anime celebration. That's one of his staples of his new comedy character. The highlight of this match for me was when Takashi got eliminated and KZ was doing it, because KZ was so animated and silly looking. A lot of fun. There's a lot of Punch Tamanaga. Ben K ultimately wins this. Probably way too long, but there's a lot of guys in this match. With guys like Doi freelancing and you book him a month ahead of time on a show like this, and then this is the match you stick him in. I get it. I get why it was long. It was too long, but getting sponsor money, you have a lot of your veteran guys like Doi in there. I give this 2.25. I thought this was fun. Definitely nothing you need to seek out. I don't think you need to skip it. If you were watching the show, couldn't blame you for skipping it because it's 20 minutes of your life you won't get back. But as someone that enjoys the entire roster, I thought this was a lot of fun. Next up, match 4 was Ryoya Tanaka defending the Bravegate title for the second time against all people but first-time challenger Masaki Mochizuki. What a spectacle this was. I loved this. Definitely not Mochizuki's best work, but he fully committed to being a Bravegate wrestler in this match, which I thought was awesome. He's a 55-year-old man, has never challenged for the Bravegate, has lost a lot of weight this year, cut weight, realized he had abs, kept cutting, legitimately cut to get to Bravegate weight, and then wrestled a Bravegate match against Tanaka. He did a moonsault to the outside, and he did a standing moonsault. He didn't pull the standing one off. He worked at a frenetic pace the whole time. This was an 11-minute match that never slowed down. It might be Tanaka's best match of the year. It's definitely not Mochi's best match of the year, but I think it's the most memorable because he completely changed his style to work this pace, which was just so cool to see. I gave this 4.25. I thought this was a blast. I seem to be higher on it than most people, but the spectacle of Mochi working a Bravegate style, and then Tanaka is really elevating up the card to the point that they booked Mochizuki to be a challenger for him. Once again, he missed his finisher, which is getting to the point where even when he hits it, it looks cool. It's like a spiral tap type of move. So it's not that it looks bad. It's not nearly as impressive in 2025 as it was in 2005. And he's just not hitting it with consistency. He's hit it picture perfect on some of the Road 2 shows, Korakuen shows. But even then, I don't think it's as good of a move as the Cross Saber, which is what he uses to set it up. And the Cross Saber should probably just be his finisher. I think the Cross Saber was his finisher previously, and with his character kind of elevating up another level, I get why he wants a different finisher. But I think it would be good to cycle back to flipping them, because I don't think he needs to cut this move out of his moveset, but for it to be the ending move of these matches and it just not being able to be consistently hit, I just don't think really works. But it's the only thing that's not working with Tanaka right now. I think Tanaka is the most fascinating guy in Dragon Gate right now because he is flourishing so quickly and at such a high level that I don't know what you do with him. He almost seems like beneath the Bravegate title already, and he almost felt that way before he even won it. He's with D-Courage, which is, Dragon Dia they put a lot of stock into last year. He's done the last 2 Battle of Super Juniors. And then Yuki Yoshioka, who's got one of these big overarching arcs over Dragon Gate and is one of the main characters. So Tanaka is kind of like the third wheel in that group, except he's totally overshadowing Dia at this point. I don't think anyone would object to that, even the Dragon Gate office. That's how they're presented. He's threatening to overshadow Yuki. He probably is, but we all know Yuki is getting this long redemption arc, so he feels like more of a main character, even though Tanaka is shining brighter than him right now. And as we'll get into, like with the main event angle and everything, I don't know where you put him, because he almost needs like his own unit, but he's not supposed to be at that level, and he's just hitting at that level right now. So you can keep him with D-Courage, and you just have D-Courage be 3 top-level guys. That's not the end of the world. It's just weird to have a trio with no weak man. The weak man is probably Daya. And you have big long-term plans for Shun. You have big long-term plans for Kikuta, and big long-term plans for Yoshioka. And Tanaka's threatening to be on that level right now. And it's a weird problem to have. It's a good problem to have, but it's starting to feel like a problem, because this guy can't be in the middle of the show that much longer. He needs to start pushing up the card. And I think he's like the kind of Dragon Gate wrestler you would make in a lab. When you think of Dragon Gate wrestler, you think of a guy that looks like Tanaka and wrestles like Tanaka. So it's very, very interesting. It's the thing I think I'm most excited to see how they handle, because Dragon Gate's booking has been phenomenal this whole year. Dragon Gate's my promotion of the year. But it's a real wrinkle in what they're going to do with him, where he fits, because he needs to be a centerpiece, and they have a lot of centerpieces planned already. We should cover the rest of this card. I gave this 4 1/4. This was awesome. This is my second match of the night. The Twin Gate match, as we'll get to, it was my match of the night. Same star rating, so this was just a smidge below. So I would recommend both. Match 4 was our Dragon Gate versus All Japan match. You had the team of YAMATO, Kimura, and Dragon Kid taking on the Aoyagi brothers in Inoue. This match had a lot of star power, and the focus in the story of the match were the kids, which I thought worked great. Inoue's kicks looked awesome. He mixed it up with all 3 guys on the Dragon Gate side. He kind of like had his way with all 3 guys, which was crazy. On the Paradox side, Kimura was the star. Kimura had the most ring time. YAMATO didn't do a whole lot in this match besides comedy with the Aoyagis. I don't even remember a kid spot in this match, but it was 6 good workers. The story they told was great, where it ultimately came down to Inoue and Kimura. All Japan went over here, which was interesting, but I think worked, because Kimura is as young of a young boy as you can get. This is his 4th professional match. They really gave him the stage to shine, and I think he did. I went 3 3/4 here. This was great. All right, match 6 was our Triangle Gate Lucha Style 2 out of 3 falls match. Team Mexico defending against Dragon Bane, Alpha Wolf, and Super Crazy. I think this was the first time Dragon Gate has ever done an all Mexico match where all 6 competitors were Mexican. I thought it worked pretty well. All 3 falls kind of felt like different matches, which I think both helped and hurt this match. I didn't really care for fall 2 at all. I thought everything was lacking on that fall. Fall 1 was good. A lot of feeling out, a lot of figuring stuff out, which I thought worked. And then fall 3, they really put it all together. If the whole match was booked like fall 3, this would have been much higher. I went 4 stars here. I thought this was good. I thought Bane and Wolf, who I'm not really that familiar with, especially during that 3rd fall, were phenomenal. I can't wait to watch more of them after that, because they were working like the Young Bucks in a lot of ways, I thought, in all the good ways. They had like a variation of More Bang for Your Buck, which was way cooler than More Bang for Your Buck. I remember that the most clearly, but a lot of their spots looked great. Lamita is always awesome. Super Crazy was the low point of this match, which you kind of figured, just given his age and years in the industry. He took the final fall, which was good to see. He couldn't really keep up with the rest of these guys, which wasn't hard to predict. So he really slowed the match down in his portions, which was unfortunate, but that was part of the reason why I wasn't super hyped for this match either, is because I've watched enough Super Crazy to know he could still go, but he can't necessarily go in this style, which was unfortunate. But I thought this was still a great match. I still went 4 stars on it. Our co-main event was the Twin Gate match of Kota Minoura and Jason Lee defending against D-Courage, the original D-Courage of Yuki Yoshioka and Dragon Daya. Like I said earlier, this was my match of the night. I went 4 1/4 on this. As someone that has just recently got back into Dragon Gate, as I say in most of my videos, I don't know prior to injury Yuki Yoshioka. I keep hearing people say, man, I hope he gets back there, or I've seen flashes. This was the first time I really saw flashes of like, oh, I see why this guy was a top guy and why people think he's a top guy. Since being gifted the high fly flow, that's the best move in his moveset. I know he was doing the frog splash prior to that. but it's added just that little extra sparkle and flair to it that really makes you take notice, and it's a beautiful thing. It's picture perfect. I love it. Kota and Lee, I think, were great champs. They did drop the straps here to D-Courage here, so all three members of D-Courage are belted up right now. Their problem was they just didn't defend the belts enough. I think most their defenses, I think all their defenses actually, were good. I didn't have any of them not close to 4 stars. Not all of them reached 4 stars, but I think the floor was 3.5. The Ray Day Prayos run was great. The Jackie Rita match all the way back from January was great. I think they really found something with these guys being tag team wrestlers. I don't know a lot of the naysaying with Kota Minoura, given my time frame of getting into Dragon Gate. I think it sounds like they figured out that he's not a top guy and he's a really high level tag wrestler, which is all I've really seen this year. I would agree. I think it's a perfect role for him. I don't want to see him as a singles, but I'm happy every time he's in one of these high spot tag matches because I feel like he always delivers. Same for Jason Lee. I didn't think Jason Lee really flourished in his Dreamgate match earlier in the year back in May. He really shines in tag matches, which I think is a good role for him. And I also think it's kind of the perfect spot for D-Courage right now. So I'm really happy that they won the tag belts because, like we talked in the Tanaka match, I think telling the story of Yoshioka kind of raising up, we're past like the slumming it part of the story, and now we're at the part of him getting it back. So going back to his roots in D-Courage is great on a story level, and I also think it's great in a like meta level of him actually kind of regaining his confidence in the ring and having Daya to bounce off of. So all the pressure's not on him. And then I think it's a good spot for Daya as well, because Daya's in this weird spot on this roster where he's elevated to the point where you can't really put him back in the Bravegate title scene. But there's just so many guys right now in that Bravegate range, and there's so many killers coming up, like Homare, that I think the ship has sailed on him winning the Bravegate, even though it felt like a foregone conclusion at Final Gate. I don't think he can win that Dream Gate anymore. So where do you stick him? And the Twin Gate is probably the best spot for him. I think it's the right spot for both guys. I'm very excited to see where they go with this. I'm going to talk about their kind of overarching arc a little more in the main event, but we covered most of it here. And the main event is Shun Skywalker making his first defense of the Open the Dream Gate belt against Madoka Kikuta. This went the way I think everyone following Dragon Gate thought it was going to go, with Kikuta getting the belt, Shun dropping it in the first defense, which is a bold choice because it's the second time Shun has dropped the belt to Kikuta, and it's the second time he's won the Dream Gate without defending it. But I think it's the right call because of the 2 long story arcs you're telling with both these guys. Shun is going to have to atone for all his sins in his 3 years as Z-Brats as he makes this face turn, and it's going to be a subtle and long face turn here. Despite clearly being positioned as the face in this match, he didn't necessarily work face, which I thought was detrimental to the match, but I think is the right call long term, just because you want everything to be earned. Ultimately, that's what you want. That's what we complain about, I think, the most as wrestling fans, is when shit is unearned. And Shun hasn't earned being a full babyface yet. But it made this match weird. It made this match pretty slow and plodding in a lot of places. Yet Kikuta leaning all the way into being heel because he's the top heel. He's the big monster in the company right now, which is exciting, which I think he's doing incredible work at. But you just had this weird dynamic of this guy being over the top heel, especially with it being so prevalent in wrestling with House of Torture and Death Riders and the Bloodline a couple years ago and Team 2000 and Hate, and every company has this right now. It's not new to Dragon Gate, but they really leaned into it for this match more than they normally do. And it's against a guy that's not really working face. He showed flashes of being face. He busted out a couple real high-flying kind of moves that you expect from Shun face, but they were just flashes. So I went 3.5 stars on here. I thought this match was a bit of a disappointment just because going in at such a pivotal storytelling point that you couldn't help but be super excited for it. I stayed up to watch it live, so this match was at 2, 3 in the morning, something like that. I drank a Celsius to stay up and watch it live, and then it's just a pretty good match. But like I said, I think it fits the long-term story where we're going. I have a lot of faith in where these long-term stories are going based on how the year has gone. So I wasn't upset about it, but it does take the wind out of your sails a little bit live that night. The closing angle we had was all the Z-Brats ripping off their shirts and throwing them down and saying Z-Brats are dead, which we knew was coming. There's a doubleheader show tomorrow in Fukuoka where I would imagine they're probably going to announce the new faction name, maybe new colors and everything on one of the two shows. I would imagine KENTA and this heel army opens at least one of the shows, if not the early show, the late show, to announce this. They're the main event of the early show, and then the opening match of the late show. It's the same trio. I think it's KENTA and Kota. One show they're taking on D-Courage, and the other, I think that was the main event. And then the other show, I can't remember who they're fighting, if it's Paradox or something, as the opener. So I think we get that name tomorrow, with All In being early. I'm out here on the West Coast, so the pre-show starts at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. And the Dragon Gate, there being a doubleheader Dragon Gate, one starting at 9 p.m., one starting at like 1 a.m. I might try to stay up and watch the 9 p.m. show live, and then I'm going to just watch either one or both of the Dragon Gate shows at the same time as All In. And I'm going to do not All In as a Forbidden Door. I think I've called it All In every time. But Forbidden Door is tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. So I'm going to watch both Dragon Gate shows and Forbidden Door and give a review tomorrow. So you guys are going to get a decent amount of content out of me this week after being MIA for a while. But yeah, I think we'll figure out what the heel unit is, what the heel unit colors will be. So you should have a video from me shortly where hopefully I'm telling you that. For our 3 long-term stories. So I hinted at in the July top 10 review and my Kobe World review that you had this year-long arc of Yamato and Paradox waiting for a young guy to step up, which ends with Shun Skywalker winning the belt, which I think was the correct conclusion for that, even though it's not directly leading into the next story. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't, because Shun obviously drops the belt right away to KENTA here. And so you have these 2 or 3 long simultaneous arcs here that are coming up for Dragon Gate, which is why I'm so excited about the rest of the year with Dragon Gate and where they're going. So you have KENTA being, this head of this heel army, looking unstoppable. He's basically an unbeatable monster right now as the Dream Gate champion. You have Shun's redemption tour, where it's him and just Homare, and he's got enemies with pretty much everyone on the roster, not just in the heel army, but he has a lot of issues with D-Courage. We've talked about he's the one that took Dragon Dia's mask. He played some role in Yoshioka being Dragon Inferno, Dia Inferno. And then, of course, when Yoshioka came back, he taunted him about Dia Inferno. But they maybe find some common ground because KENTA ultimately betrayed Courage, took Yoshioka's hair. So those stories possibly intertwine. But then you have, of course, he played a role in Luis Mante losing his mask on Team Mexico. And up and down the roster, everyone pretty much hates Shun. So how does he atone for that? How does he become babyface when the whole roster hates him? That's a long arc. And then the arc that started with his return in March, Yokiyosha's road back to the top and where that goes. So I think we had the second big pivot point. So the first big pivot point was he's kind of down on his luck. He can't figure it out, which leads to KENTA turning on him, taking his hair. Because he took KENTA's spot in the Rey de Parejas, didn't deliver at all, kept not delivering, was kind of a shell of his former self. KENTA was the top guy in that group, but it's supposed to be Yoshioka, which led to KENTA turning and joining Z-Brats. And you have this second major pivot point here, maybe third depending on the Tanahashi match, but the second pivot point here where him and Dia regain the Twin Gate belts. This is their third reign. The second reign ended when they had to vacate because of Yoshioka's eye injury. So the train's back on the track now. Tanahashi gifted him the high fly flow, which seemed to give him his confidence back. He's flashing more and more like the previous Yoshioka. So now he's the Twin Gate champ. I think they'll have a pretty sustained Twin Gate run. What's interesting is it feels like the end of the road for the Shun's storyline is him and Homare winning the Twin Gate belts, or at least that feels like a potential conclusion to the story. So it's interesting with D-Courage being the Twin Gate belts. It doesn't mean they beat Yuki and Dia, but that's an interesting wrinkle to think about right now. But Yoshioka, this story probably ends with him regaining the Dream Gate belt. And that road's not necessarily clear right now, even though that's kind of the road they're heading on. So that will be very interesting. So you have 2 things here. So you have the obvious link with KENTA turning during the cage match, taking his hair. Yoshioka's not ready to win the belt right now, and Kikuta's not ready to lose right now. So, do you do a match now where Kikuta just runs through him and you get like kind of this roadblock element to the story? Or do you hold off on it for months and months and not do it till 4 or 5 months down the line? I'm not sure where I land on that. I think it's pretty interesting both ways. And then the other big wrinkle, like I've alluded to this whole video, is what do you do with Ryoya Tanaka? Tanaka can't be the third wheel of this story, so does he turn heel? Maybe Yoshioka is small enough to win the Brave Gate from Tanaka, or maybe you have a show where, you know, one of these Korokins where Tanaka turns on them, costs them the Twin Gate belt, and then whatever the next big show is, I'm blanking on what it is in October, you do the two main events, and you do Tanaka versus Daya and Yoshioka versus Kikuta. That could be pretty interesting. I think Tanaka could work as a heel. Him being the second heel under Kikuta would be pretty interesting because they seemed the most aligned in D-Courage. So that seems natural. And even with this heel army having, you know, Ishin Kai, Kato, Kota Minoura, I think Tanaka could slot in pretty easily as the number 2 right there. So that may be where we go. I'm very intrigued where the Yoshioka story goes. I'm very intrigued where the Shun story goes. And then Kikuta is this dominant force of nature right now. So now he has the Twin Gate. He's taken Z-Brats away from Shun. They're going to rebrand it. He took Yoshioka's hair. He beat the crap out of Strong Machine J. So where does he go from now? He needs to keep beating the crap out of people. Who do you feed to him? And then where does this story go next? So you got the obvious veterans, YAMATO and Mochizuki, that you can always feed to him. Mochizuki just lost a Dream Gate and a Brave Gate belt championship match, not the belt. So it seems a bit early for him, but you could have him like take Ryofuda from the dojo, and that leads to Mochi Kikuta pretty easily. I think that could work. I guess the same thing with Paradox is you could get Doi to turn heel again, and that could be the road to YAMATO Kikuta. I think those are two pretty obvious directions for Kikuta to go short term in defenses. I think you want to revisit Strong Machine J. It's probably too early for that because he won pretty definitively against Jay. Ben K won the Vinegar Battle Royal, so you could maybe do a Ben K Kikuta like Korakuen match or something, or one of the major shows even. Love&Peace is an interesting wrinkle on the roster right now because they just don't win, which is upsetting some people. It doesn't necessarily upset me, even though they're my favorite faction, because they just kind of remind me of best friends. I said this in Doc's podcast. They feel like Chuck and Trent, where they're going to be over and you're going to love them. It doesn't matter how many times they lose. They don't need to win anything. It does feel weird to have this much talent in that group and for them to lose to everyone, including Mochizuki Dojo. So you got to toe that line a little bit, but I don't foresee a big Love&Peace push ever coming, which I think is fine because I think they're so lovable and so easy to like that it's not detrimental for them to lose. And that's valuable on this roster when you have all these killers that you got to push. You got Ishin, Homare, Tanaka, Kimura, Yoshioka, Kikuta, Shun, Strong Machine J. There's just a lot of guys, so you need guys to lose. And I think Love&Peace play that role pretty great, and you can slot them everywhere. In Kobe World, they lost the Twin Gate and the Triangle Gate match. Jackie or Rita can both challenge for the Brave. Mochizuki Jr. can even challenge for the Brave. He's done that before. Hyo can as well. So you got a lot of fodder that you can go through for Tanaka if Tanaka turns heel, or even if he doesn't. And then Ben K is a former 2-time Dream Gate champ, so he can wrestle Kikuta. So I think there's runway for Kikuta here. He doesn't have to be the main character story, the main characters of these long arching stories to express his dominance. The other Kikuta thing I think is interesting is I don't think just Z-Brats is going to rebrand. I've talked about this in my other videos, but Natural Vibes feels ready for a disbandment. So you could do a Kikuta match where they do a unit disbands against Natural Vibes. You could potentially disband Paradox. D-Courage, I don't necessarily feel like you disband anymore, but if Tanaka leaves, then it's just a tag team. So what do you do with that necessarily is interesting. But yeah, these next coming months, we should have a good amount of faction turnover now, as well as progressing these 3 main stories. I'm very excited about that. And that's going to end our wrestling talk right now. So then let's get into the movie Weapons.
All right, so let's talk about Weapons. So the inspiration for making this video, which would have been more effective if I did it after getting out of the theaters, was that a lot of the reviews that opening weekend was like, oh, this is a horror masterpiece. This is like one of the best horror movies of all time. It's better than Sinners. It's better than Longlegs, etc., etc., which I just vehemently disagreed with. I don't think this was a bad movie. I just think it was a very mid movie. So the way it was getting hyped really bothered me. I think because I'm very late to the game actually recording this and putting it out, it's course corrected a bit, but I still just wanted to get my thoughts out on Weapons because I did think it was a thought-provoking movie. I don't think it's bad. I don't even necessarily not recommend it. I just thought it was like a 2.5 star movie. If I'm rating it just as a horror movie, it's probably more like 3.5 because horror movies traditionally aren't great. But I just thought it was getting billed like a must-see movie, and I don't think it was as good as Sinners. I don't think it was nearly as good as Longlegs. I kind of felt like it was a Longlegs ripoff in a lot of ways. So let's get into it, and then I did a little bit at the end that I took the time to put together, so we'll get to that. So I think overall the story was effective, and I liked some of the choices they made. I just felt like the execution didn't really work. So they did the story where this mystery happens at a town. All these kids disappear from this one teacher's classroom, and they tell it from like 5 different perspectives, I think, which I think worked with Ruth Langmore from Ozarks. I think her actual name is Julie Gardner, but she'll always be Ruth to me. She was very good in Ozarks, and she was the best part of this movie as the teacher that all her students disappeared. So the town thought she was a witch and all that stuff. I thought her perspective was very good, and that was the first perspective told. That was the opening of the story. That was how you kind of get the setup of the story, was through her perspective. And I think that was the strongest part of the movie, which I think is what really hindered the movie in an odd way, because then you do Josh Brolin's storyline, you do the cop storyline, you do the druggie storyline, and then you do the one kid from Ruth Langmore. I can't remember what her character's name in this movie is. It might be Julie, or that might just be the actress's actual name. He had like a class of 18 kids. He was the only kid that didn't disappear. So he's the final perspective. And I think they kind of progressively got worse and less interesting, which is my big issue. Oh, no, there was a 6th perspective, because then you had the school principal mixed in there somewhere. And so I think had the movie kept that same level as the first story, I think hype would have been worth it. But the problem is, I just thought the story kind of progressively got more boring. And then as you kind of piece together the mystery and figure out the mystery, at least in the case of like me and Kia, we figured it out, I think, before the cop story, the cop perspective started. So that's like halfway through the movie. So I guess let's just pick apart some of the story and we'll cover it, because I'm going to end up bouncing around anyway, because the story kind of bounces around. My big issue with this movie was what I was just alluding to, is I kind of knew the mystery. I didn't know 100% of it, but I knew where it was going before we did the cop storyline and the druggie storyline. And those didn't add anything to this story. So it was just kind of like 45 minutes of filler in a movie, which I just really dislike. I'm not a fan of that at all. I just don't think any of those stories added anything, really. Especially the cop. The druggie, I'm a little more, okay, wishy-washy on, but... So I guess to get there, so the first story is from the teacher, which kind of tells the story of the town was turned against her. She's kind of leaning on alcohol. She doesn't have any friends because her students disappeared, and everyone's conclusion is that she had something to do with it, because why would the kids only from her class disappear? And so that kind of element of the thriller, like people are fucking with her and stuff, was good. And then the second part was Josh Brolin, which I thought was okay. I have a weird relationship with Josh Brolin where I don't dislike him as an actor. I don't even necessarily think he's a bad actor. I just find him boring, and thus I don't enjoy any of his movies. I know that's kind of controversial because No Country for Old Men is considered like a really big classic. I thought that movie was just boring, and I just think every movie he's in is boring. So I don't know why I'm surprised that I thought this movie was boring, because I thought this movie was boring too. I think he did his part well. I just think whatever his like on-screen charisma is, I personally just find boring and not compelling. And that was still the case in this movie, but he was one of the more compelling characters. So I think that is a big issue for me as well, is he told the perspective of a parent that's just not going to accept that his kid disappeared. So he's doing more than the cops, and while he hates the teacher like everyone else does, he doesn't want to just put all his grief into hating her. He wants to figure out what happened to his son, which was effective, but the deeper into the story you get, I feel like that storyline still had a lot of plot holes because there was just stuff like he was going around knocking on other parents' doors and asking to see their security footage and drawing a line of what direction they're heading in and stuff. And we get a lot of the cops in this movie that insist they're working the case, and maybe that's kind of a subplot that's not really told that I didn't pick up, that it's supposed to be a story about how cops don't do their job. I don't know if that was supposed to be a subliminal subplot. I didn't think they did a very good job of it, but it was just kind of bizarre that the whole town is going through this. You know, it's like all the town is thinking about, but only one fucking guy, and the whole town is like, hey, all the kids are Naruto running in a straight line. Where does that straight line go? I thought that was pretty flimsy, just because, like, that shouldn't have been the conclusion. Like, the one person that the teacher leans on, Ruth Langmore, is the cop we get the perspective of, which you would think, like, she would push him more. I think there was a scene of her being like, hey, work on this, and he's like, I am working on it, but that's all you really get. So it's just weird that no one was really problem solving any of this, because so the movie starts with the 17 kids. You see them running out of their houses. They all kind of run in a straight line, and like the Ring cameras and stuff capture it, but you can't see where they're going because eventually they just run into the dark and you can't tell where they're going. But they just all run in a straight line, and as the movie progresses, you learn it's like witchcraft and everything. So they all run directly to a house. So they run in a straight line to that house. Which, that's another part that really bugged me about this movie, is so the teacher grieving, the only person she can really share that grief with is the kid that remains in her class, because they're the two survivors of it, essentially, right? Which makes sense. But the principal and stuff is telling her she can't talk to him because he's just a kid, and they need to do what's best for the kid, which makes sense. So she ultimately follows him home, and so she's the first person that discovers the home, peeps in the window and sees his parents just sitting there motionless and not moving, and then does nothing about it. Did she tell the principal? Maybe she did call the principal and tell him that. She did, because that leads to the wellness check. Okay. So she acted on it somewhat, but she didn't tell her cop boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, whatever, at all. So circling back to the cop. So she has a drinking problem. It's alluded to that she used to date the cop, and now the cop is married or engaged or something. She gets him to meet her at a bar, that he's in AA, and then ultimately they end up drinking and sleeping together and stuff, right? So I don't know if it's supposed to villainize her or just be a way that people deal with grief or stress or whatever, but so you get that, and then you get a scene of the next time she goes to the liquor store, this woman ends up beating her up and like harassing her and pouring vodka on her and stuff, which we find out later when we get the cop's perspective that that's the cop's fiance, but that's it. Like, there's no resolution to that at all. We get a lot of like her perspective and then his perspective, right? That's kind of the gimmick of telling the 6 perspectives, but you don't learn new things from the different perspectives. So I started getting really annoyed with that gimmick towards the end of the movie, especially during the cop, because you replay him going to the bar and him sleeping with her, and then he goes home and his wife finds out, and you find out he has all these interpersonal relationships with like the chief of police, his fiance's dad, and all this shit. And it has no through line to the plot at all. It's just stuff, I guess, to fill out the town. But it has no relevance to anything, really, I guess, besides making us think that the teacher is a drunken adulterer. I just didn't think any of it landed. I didn't think any of it was compelling at all. And it went nowhere. And it took up not just part of her perspective, which I did think was like the weakest part, because I'm like, why do I care about this cop and that she's hooking up with this cop? But then we get the whole cop perspective that doesn't add anything to it, because it's just like, oh, he knows the teacher, and then he has these hijinks with this druggie, which is maybe supposed to be comic relief, and it's not that it wasn't comical in parts. It was just movies you kind of think of in like 3 parts. You have like the beginning, the climax, and the end. And the cop and the druggies thing is in the middle, so it's at the climax, and they're just having like hijinks and shit, and it doesn't mean anything to the fucking movie, and it's all just it's 30 to 45 minutes of setup just to get them to be bodies in the house. And that's it. That's their whole purpose of this story, is to be bodies for Josh Brolin to throw around comically. And you just didn't need it. It didn't matter at all. There were just other ways you could do it, because you had the two parents in the house, which I guess you want to terrorize their son. But I don't know, because then you still have the witch turn Josh Brolin at a point. So I just feel like there should have been ways to get to the house, in the climax of the house, without wasting 45 minutes on its jokes and bullshit that didn't go anywhere. Which that section just really hurt the movie for me, because I think once you figured out the mystery, like I said, you kind of figure it out once we get to the principal's perspective, and he calls the family for a wellness check, and Aunt Gladys shows up, who ends up being the witch and the villain. And you know pretty much right away, because all the characters get haunted by the image of her. So the teacher and Josh Brolin and even the cop and druggie, which I think happens after, but they all see her, and she has a very distinct look, so there's no surprise that it's her. Like, when she walks in the principal's office, you go, oh, that's who they're fucking seeing. So you figure it out pretty quickly right then and there that, okay, Aunt Gladys is the reason that Alex, the kid that survives, and she's clearly living in the house where his parents are dead, sitting in the couch or whatever the hell's going on with the parents. And then it just takes us another hour to get to the conclusion, and you don't add anything from there. I thought the principal part, for the most part, worked with Benedict Wong. I don't really have any issues with that. It was just like, you see the Aunt Gladys, right? She gives you like the heebie-jeebies, whatever, right? And then we cut to him at the house on a Saturday, and she shows up at the house, and that leads to like her showing you how she does all her witchcraft, which all works, because so the ending of Josh Brolin's perspective is he sees the teacher at the gas station. He goes to confront her, and the principal, Benedict Wong, just charges her and starts attacking her. So then he starts fighting him off, and then you cut to whatever the next perspective is. Maybe it is the cop. Maybe you go Josh Brolin, cop, drunkie, principal. I don't remember exactly. But you end his segment with like, oh, the principal was foaming black out the mouth. That must have been a dream sequence, or maybe it was real, because it seemed real. It doesn't end up being real. And so that's kind of the whole point of the principal's perspective, is you find out who Aunt Gladys is, and then you find out it is real when he charges them and everything. I think he is the last perspective before Alex, because then that leads to getting back to the main perspective of the teacher, Ruth Langmore, and Josh Brolin. But without the movie telling you, it's coming back to me. Sorry, it's been a few weeks, which is why I said at the beginning it would be more effective if it did this instantly. But before you get the reveal of Aunt Gladys and stuff, you know that it's some sort of hijinks like that, because then other people start seeing Aunt Gladys, and then the junkie goes into the house, and he finds the kids and everything in the basement there. So the reveal of Aunt Gladys isn't really satisfying, because it didn't really make a difference if it was Alex or the aunt. I didn't feel like it was a reveal, or like, oh, thank God it's not an evil kid, because evil kids are a normal part of horror movies. So I didn't feel like it was a compelling twist at all. And it just took us a long time to get there. And then when you get Alex's perspective, that kind of fills in all the holes. But at that point, I'm just fucking ready to leave. I'm like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to fucking sit through this. And then you get to the end, and the ending is satisfying. The ending sequence is the best part of the movie. It's legitimately hilarious. And I think if the ride was half as long, it would be worth getting there. Because ultimately, this is from the director of Barbarian, and it hits a lot of the same points as Barbarian, but Barbarian was a lot less grueling to get through. And I mean grueling in a bad way, because it was boring to get through. I think Barbarian was a much better movie, and I don't understand why this one is getting like better reviews and stuff. It's probably better acted, but I think is much more worsely paced. And I don't think it's necessarily better written. Not that Barbarian is greatly written, so maybe if I really sat down and rewatched Barbarian and thought about the writing here is slightly better. But I just think there's a lot of hits and misses in this movie, and I just think it would have been better served as like an hour and 10-minute movie instead of a 2-hour movie, because there's just a lot of shit in this movie that doesn't add anything, or adds, it adds like a breadcrumb to a whole dish. Like it just doesn't add much. So I just think a lot of this movie was boring. I keep repeating myself, but that's kind of was my main takeaway. Was me and Keo were ready to walk out of the theater from being so bored watching this movie. I think it's a work. I think watching this at home and watching it in 3 chunks, doing 2 stories, like as a TV show, I think would have worked a little better. Even though the cop and the druggie are still meaningless storylines ultimately, but I think when you're not an hour plus into the movie and getting meaningless and you're doing it in 3 sittings or 2 sittings or something, that would be a little better. So overall, I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's 2.5, and I think knowing what I'm getting into without the hype and kind of knowing what to expect, I probably would be more like a 3 out of 5 stars on this. But I just didn't think it was a classic horror movie in any way. So then the last thing I wanted to do was I wanted to do Gimmick based on being a Voices of Wrestling listener and Joe Lanza doing 100 tag teams better than the Dudley Boys. I did a list of 100 horror movies or thrillers better than Weapons, because everyone was saying how great Weapons is and how it's one of the best of all time, and I don't agree. So I have the list. I'll read it off to you. I got more than 100. So originally what I was going to do was I was going to do 100 horror movies better than Weapons and 100 thrillers better than Weapons. And I couldn't quite get to 100 on both lists. And I was really kind of scraping the barrel with the thrillers. So I started using like Google for help to think of like, okay, what ones aren't I thinking of? And trying to not double up on anything. So doing 100 thrillers that weren't on the 100 horror list. And Google was giving me shit like Captain America, Winter Soldier, and like The Raid Redemption and stuff, which I think are better movies than Weapons, but I wouldn't call them thrillers. So I cleaned my list up, made it horror or thriller movies, or horror/thrillers, however you want to refer to it. I did it for the most part, but there might still be some bullshit on here. We'll play it by ear as I read it off. If like a Captain America somehow made this list and I missed it, we'll cut it out in real time. But I'm going to list 100 as more than 100. But I'll do the gimmick like Lanza did. So 100 horror thriller movies better than Weapons. Number 1, the original Halloween. Number 2, The Strangers. Number 3, Talk to Me. Number 4, Barbarian, from the same writer-director, was a better movie. Number 5, Hereditary. Number 6, Midsommar. Number 7, Long Legs. Long Legs is just a better version of Weapons from beginning to end. Number 8, The Crazies. Number 9, The Black Phone. Number 10, Sinners. That was supposed to say Sinister. So number 10, Sinister. Number 11, Sinners. Number 12, Final Destination Bloodlines. The newest Final Destination is, I think, really the only good one. Number 3, 13. Number 14, Prey. I think I said that wrong. Number 14, A Quiet Place. Number 15, Quiet Place Day 1. Number 16, It Chapter 1. 17, Smile. 18, The First Omen. 19, Godzilla -1. That one's kind of pushing it, but that's okay. Number 20, Insidious. Number 21, Get Out. Number 22, Us. Number 23, The Menu. 24, Last Night in Soho. 25, Host. 27, The Hunt. That was supposed to be 26. 27, Brightburn. 28, the David Gordon Green Halloween. I think that Halloween is the second best Halloween that's been made. It was so good that I watched Halloween Ends, even though Halloween Kills fucking was terrible because of how good this Halloween is. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, fucking terrible. Much worse than Weapons, but this Halloween better than Weapons. 29, Life. 30, Saw. 31, Jeepers Creepers. 32, The Belko Experiment. 33, The Conjuring. 34, The Conjuring 2. 35, Hush. 36, The Purge. 37, The Purge Election Year. 38, Split. 39, Train to Busan. Number 40, As Above, So Below. 41, It Follows. 42, Let the Right One In. 43, Shudder. 44, The Descent. 45, Orphan. 46, I Am Legend. 47, The Host. Different from Host. 48, 28 Days Later. 49, Dawn of the Dead. 50, The Ring. 51, Frailty. 52, Scream. 53, Scream 6. A lot of those in the middle, not very good. 54, In the Mouth of Madness. 55, Alien. 56, Amityville Horror. Pick 'em. I like the Ryan Reynolds one and the original one. I only listed one there. 57, Silence of the Lamb. 58, Predator. 59, Audition. 60, Rosemary's Baby. 61, Nightmare on Elm Street. 62, Jaws. 63, The Exorcist. 64, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 65, The Shining. 66, The Cabin in the Woods. 67, the original Paranormal Activity. 68, The Babadook. 69, You're Next. 70, Ichi the Killer. 71, Psycho. 72, Night of the Living Dead. 73, Carrie. 74, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. 75, The Wailing. 76, Pan's Labyrinth. 77, Creep. 78, They Live. 79, Annihilation. 80, Late Night with the Devil. 81, Megan. 82, The Orphanage. 83, Attack the Block. 84, Ready or Not. 85, The Invitation. 86, Saw 10, Saw X. 87, Nope. I'm not sure why I didn't get that with other Jordan Peele movies. 88, The Girl with the Gifts. 89, A Simple Favor. 90, the original Speak No Evil. 91, the Speak No Evil remake. 92, I Saw the Devil. 93, Old Boy. 94, The Man from Nowhere. 95, Nightcrawler. 96, Memento. 97, Battle Royale. 98, Training Day. 99, Vanilla Sky. 100, Signs. Alright, and if you're saying, Tay, all of those are better than Weapons, only 95 of them are. Don't worry, I've got another 41. 101, The Machinist. 102, The Assault on Precinct 13. 103, Red Eye. 104, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. 105, The Prestige. 106, V for Vendetta. 107, Funny Games. 108, Parasite. 109, A Cure for Wellness. 110, Ex Machina. 111, Interstellar. 112, We Need to Talk About Kevin. 13, Moon. 14, The Chaser. 15, In Bruges. Not sure that should be on here. 116, Zodiac. 117, Lady Vengeance. 118, Requiem for a Dream. 119, Fight Club. 120, Falling Down. 121, Taxi Driver. 122, A Clockwork Orange. 123, Memories of Murder. 124, City of God. 125, Fargo. 126, The Illusionist. 127, District 9. 128, Arrival. 129, Joker. 130, War of the Worlds. Not the Ice Cube one. That one fucking sucks. 131, Snowpiercer. 132, The Lobster. 133, Civil War. Not the Captain America one. The one that came out in theaters last year. 134, Wind River. 135, Underwater. 136, Together. 138, 28 years later. I went through my letterbox here for the last ones and picked ones rated higher than 2.5. 138, The Substance. 139, Alien Romulus. 140, The Invisible Man. And 141, Immaculate, with Sydney Sweeney. That one probably shouldn't be there either. So, there you go. Making that list made me realize Weapons is probably a little better than I gave it credit for. But it is not one of the best horror movies of all time. It's not fucking even close. But it's decent. It's alright. Alright, thanks guys. Bye.